Representative Norma Torres was inside the House chamber when it was then overrun Wednesday afternoon.
She talked to KCAL 9's Stacey Butler tonight about her ordeal, and she's calling now for action against the Capitol Police chief.
Torres is calling for the arrest of Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund, who resigned yesterday. She claims he initially refused the help of the National Guard and claims he didn't arm enough of his officers in riot gear. She says there's more.
This was an inside job. Certainly there were officers that are, potentially involved in the incident that happened. Insiders, you don't get to find the offices of leadership in the areas where they are, in the hidden areas where they are. You don't get to walk around the Capitol the way some of these people did, not just on Wednesday, but on Tuesday, without an insider letting them in. We need to know who those people were, and we need to prosecute them.
Representative Torres is calling not only for the arrest of the police chief, but for a full investigation into the backgrounds of all the officers who were on duty.
And it raises the question that you have in any time you have this kind of government law enforcement failure, which is, was this mere incompetence? Okay, they misunderstood the threat, they failed in multiple ways, and then we got the scenes we have. Or was there something malicious here? And that's a question I'm stating. We don't have the answers yet. But you'd need an investigation of a governmental type, as well as the journalism that will continue to ask, did this many members of the Capitol Police and other federal law enforcement who were tasked with protecting an extraordinary meeting of the entire Congress, the vice president, et cetera, did they merely fail over and over incompetently? Or were there some who were in some way a party to this, in some way maliciously partaking? And those are questions that an independent investigation can tackle. Some of the videos that are already going around and some of the things we're tracking raise really disturbing questions about a total law enforcement failure. The last thing I'll say, given these images, were the heavy security you see now could have been instituted earlier in the day.
If there is one inescapable truth that you should be able to take away from the attempted coup that took place on last Wednesday, it's this. This insurrection was an inside job. The white media knows it. The Capitol Hill Police certainly know that several of their members were involved in allowing access to the Capitol building, and members of Congress know it. So far, you've had Representative Norma Torres and even Negro Jim Clyburn, who have both said that this was an inside job, that there's no way in hell that these terrorists could have gotten access to the Capitol building without having been let in, and that people were letting them know where to go. Norma Torres happened to be a lot more direct than that, saying that members of the Capitol Hill Police were complicit in it and there needs to be an investigation about it. You just saw the clip with Ari Melber saying the same thing. Now, where the hell do you think that these members of the Capitol Hill Police come from? They come from police departments like the Philadelphia PD, who gladly took selfies with the Proud Boys, and other police departments who are fist bumping and shaking hands with these guys and making nice with them. This is who makes up the roster of the Capitol Hill Police. Kind of reminds me of that movie Safe House, where Denzel Washington tells Ryan Reynolds that safe house was a secure location. Whoever crashed it, they were invited. Well, that's exactly what happened here. You know damn well the law enforcement was involved in this. In fact, no less than the Washington Post, or rather Jeff Bezos' little rag, they've reported the same thing. Police departments across the U.S. opened probes into whether their own members took part in the Capitol riot. Well, I can go ahead and save them some time on that. It's already been found that a number of them have. Now, the lie that they're trying to use is, oh, well, they were on the grounds, but they didn't enter the Capitol building. Well, they were on the grounds, you see. Now, you've seen cover-up after cover-up where the police lied about shooting people in the back, lied about indiscriminately firing into innocent crowds. The cops lied through their goddamn teeth. And by the way, you even had police chiefs who were involved in this carnage. At least one police chief was found to have been involved in this insurrection. But the white media is trying to figure out, how do we talk around that? The Washington Post, on the other hand, they took a far different tack with this. They know that the black media has been pushing this particular line of inquiry about the police's involvement in this, because you could not have had something like this go down without the police being involved. There's no way in hell that most of the cops seemed to be out of position, that they were undermanned at the perfect moment. The terrorists knew exactly where to go to, and they were being let in. The cops removed the barricades. That was them handing the Congress over to the terrorists. This was clearly an inside job. So it's been confirmed that there was at least one police chief who was taking part in the insurrection, and at least one former Army lieutenant colonel who was involved. By the way, for that lieutenant colonel who made it all the way to the floor of the Senate, that bastard needs to be acquainted with Rocks and Shoals. That's the name of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is still in effect. Any military officer who takes place in a mutiny or sedition can be put to death. Not that there's much threat of that happening with Jim Crow Joe about to take the reins of power. But the Washington Post story goes on to write that the probes into the police involvement in this sedition come after an especially fraught year for U.S. policing that saw massive civil rights protests against police violence. They are likely to raise questions about free speech, the expansion of surveillance, and public trust in law enforcement, while legal experts warn the scrutiny could have unintended consequences. That's what the entire gist of this Washington Post article, so-called article, was. It's actually a very thinly veiled threat. This article was not written to discuss the police's participation in this terrorist attack. It was meant to say, all of you people out there talking about how the police need to be investigated and you want all the tools brought to bear against the police. Oh, you're going to make the police into the criminals, huh? Well, just so you know, this could be easily turned on you. That's what the entire gist of this entire so-called article. Keep in mind, the Washington Post is one of the, as Dr. Noam Chomsky called it, agenda-setting media. They set the frame for the rest of the white media. They are the paper of record inside the Beltway. They happen to be the mouthpiece for official established power inside the Beltway. And what official established power is saying is, if you call yourselves trying to get us to finally crush the enforcement arm of white supremacy, even though that arm attempted to strangle us, well, just understand we'll turn all of our surveillance on you. This is going to bounce back on you. That's what this article is meant to say. It wasn't about the police. It was about, you better stop agitating for the police to be the ones put under the spotlight. But look at the wording that's used. These probes are likely to raise questions about free speech. That's the first thing they come out with. This is about free speech. This is not about free speech. This is about treason. This is about white supremacy. This is about protecting terrorism under the guise of making sure that white privilege remains intact no matter what. The expansion of surveillance, with everything from the freaking USA Patriot Act to whatever, especially black people in America, we have had absolutely no expectation of our privacy rights ever being respected. So you're not scaring us with this kind of talk. This might scare some white suburbanites, but it ain't scaring black people. And public trust in law enforcement, that ship sailed and sank out at sea a long time ago. Nobody trusts the police. You want to know why? Because of things like this. Oh, the white media is trying to minimize it already. And just in case the minimization efforts don't work, they're letting you know this is all going to come back on you guys if you keep pushing too hard. After they go ahead and do some perfunctory mentions of, oh, this cop was found to have been at the insurrection and this one over here and this one over here. Well, they all say that they were not actually in the Capitol building. They were just watching. They didn't actually take part. They were just watching. Yeah, right. Washington Post quotes a law professor named Kate Levine who said the public appetite for officers to face harsh discipline for attending or taking a more hands-on role in the chaos. Now look at the word. Look at that wording. Taking a more hands-on role in the chaos. I think what they mean is assaulting Capitol Hill police, destroying and sacking the Capitol building, and engaging in general murderous mayhem that resulted in the death of at least one Capitol Hill policeman and 4 terrorists. But Kate Levine says that if the public's appetite for cops to be punished harshly doesn't stop, it could have unintended consequences that could ultimately harm vulnerable communities that are already over-policed. What? If you call for terrorists, especially the ones who wear badges, to be punished, well, this is going to have blowback on you. This is going to come back on you. Ultimately, this is going to be turned on you. This is a very thinly veiled threat coming from the Washington Post. Now, this Levine woman was next quoted as having said, "Public pressure does a lot of things, and it would be illogical to discipline people for attending a rally." Is this supposed to be an article, or is this supposed to be a defense for the terrorists? Well, we know which one it is. It's a defense for the terrorists. Yeah, you got the enforcement arm of white supremacy that needs protection from the propaganda arm. The police are part of the government, and even when they are trying to overthrow the government, well, they still got to be protected because, after all, the primary function of the police department is to control black people and the political threat that we pose to white supremacy. So you can't have it become habit forming that the police are actually, there's going to be a widespread search to make sure that every police officer involved in this, anyone who supported it, anyone who cheered it on, is going to be called out. Man, this could be far more damning than even this summer's uprisings, because that's what's happening here. The police are being exposed for the thugs that they are, the thugs that black people have always said they are. So in 2020, it was all about police brutality. In 2021, it's going to be all about story after story showing that police took part in an attempted overthrow of the government. Ooh, defund the police is going to be the least of the cops' worries under those circumstances. So the white media is already stepping in now. We got to get out ahead of this. We got to make it clear that, if there were any cops there, well, they were standing on the grass, or they were over by the Supreme Court building. They were certainly nowhere near the Capitol building, and they definitely didn't take part in it. Or, as Kate Levine says, if they took a more hands-on role in the chaos, even if they did take a more hands-on role in the chaos, well, calling yourselves investigating the police, that could easily be turned on those black folks. Things could get worse with them for the surveillance state. That's an empty threat. Things are already as bad as they're going to be. You don't have anything to threaten us with. In fact, the surveillance state was created, augmented, and super turbocharged specifically to go after us. You don't have any threats. Now, this Levine woman, who is clearly saying what the opinion of the Washington Post is, that's why they give her all this space. They're giving all this space because she's saying what the Washington Post wants put out there. And she says that the wave of support to tap all available technology, including facial recognition and other tools that have complex privacy concerns, ultimately can work to legitimize and expand the surveillance state, she said. We're talking about terrorists who just tried to overthrow the government. And you got the Washington Post saying, well, you better be careful demanding that all available technology and whatever types of means of surveillance and whatever means you have of electronic surveillance or electronic investigation that you can use to find these terrorists, you better be careful about demanding those things being used against police, because that can work to legitimize and expand the surveillance state. What the hell are they talking about? There's been law after law after law after law passed with complete impunity that have made it where the government can do whatever the hell they want, including kill American citizens if they believe you're a terrorist. Well, that is as long as you're not white. If you're white, well, they're going to bring you in. They're going to have to arrest you alive. They're going to take you alive. And then you're going to have a cute little trial where they say, time served, you've done, that's good enough for you. The surveillance state is already expansive and pervasive. You're a little bit late on that when you're coming in real late acting like, ooh, this could cause a surveillance state. Where the hell have you been at? Obviously not the U.S. But look at what the hell they're saying. You're supposed to use every available technology when it comes to finding terrorists. The bastards tried to overthrow the government. And here the Washington Post is arguing against investigating the terrorists. Oh, especially the ones who have badges, because, well, we don't want people seeing that, because after 2020, the police their reputation is already in the toilet. You start having story day after day, week after week saying this police officer was taking part in the DC coup attempt. This police officer was ransacking offices in the Capitol building last week. This sheriff's deputy took direct part in the insurrection. Then people are going to be looking and going, God dang, the police are even worse than the black people were saying they were. These guys are not just brutal thugs, they're traitors. Oh, there's not going to be any question about that then. And then it's going to be a matter of, you know what? The police don't need to merely be defunded. They need to be abolished. The white media can see exactly where this is going. That's part of what the white media's job is. Look at where the trend is going. Where's the trend line going towards? And now they're trying to get out in front of it. Oh, you guys are demanding that the police be treated like criminals. Yeah, because they are criminals. You go to the U.S. Capitol and you help to overrun all of the protection there so that you can sack the Capitol building and you can even murder people. Yeah, I'd say that that's criminal activity and should be punished. But the Washington Post, well, as far as they're concerned, you better be watching out for yourselves. And just to make sure that black people understand that this Levine woman is talking about us, she's quoted as saying, "And it's a weight which inevitably falls on the shoulders of the least powerful and most marginalized people. Within police departments, this time it hits MAGA people, but next time it hits Black Lives Matter." Well, so you're telling me that the surveillance state did not bring all of its weapons to bear during the Ferguson uprising or the Baltimore uprising or all of 2020? Jussie Smollett pulls an alleged hoax, and the police were able to find the two alleged co-conspirators with him as collaborators. These guys were not even American citizens. There was absolutely nothing that actually made it where you could directly find them, and yet the Chicago PD found these guys in a matter of hours. Two foreigners whose faces were completely and thoroughly hard to see, or so we thought. Because in many cases, what happens is the police will have clear images of these guys, clear enough for investigative work, but what they show to the media will be pictures that have been greatly degraded. The U.S. government does that too, by the way. They take these pictures that can read a license plate on a car from 50,000 feet in the air from satellites, and then what they show to the public is a greatly degraded image. Because they don't want to show just how good their technology is. Same thing goes with these police departments. What, you think that these guys weren't using facial recognition technology and other tools that have complex privacy concerns? Yeah, when it comes to black people, nobody's talking about, well, what about free speech? And what about the expansion of surveillance? And what about the public's ability to trust that their privacy is being respected by the government? Nobody ever talks like that. Especially not about black people. Nobody ever uses phrases like that. With black people, it's a matter of, what about public safety concerns? And the police's hands are tied and the public is crying. You know, there's been so many murders. There's been X amount of robberies and rapes, and the police have pressure on them to do something, and they feel like their hands are tied. And that's the slant of the story. Now it's time to talk about the police carrying out their typical, predictable, usual, raucous rioting and mayhem. And the white media's all bringing out the violins and saying, oh, please think of the badges. No, this is terrorism, and that being the case, you're supposed to be all hands on deck. After all, what's that technology for if not to go after subversives and seditionists and terrorists? Oh, but we were thinking about black ones. The white ones, you're not supposed to be using that against white ones. Yeah, you know it's going to be used against white people. So we got to stop it, just like with meth. The meth epidemic, that's not a criminal justice issue. That's a public health issue. Well, they're killing people, aren't they? These meth dealers are killing people, aren't they? Well, they're fighting over turf, having shootouts, right? Well, it's different. How is it different? Well, reasons. But the Washington Post is putting it in black and white. You niggers, you're pushing because of you, the public has an appetite for the police to face harsh discipline. Well, when you're committing murders, I do think that harsh discipline is called for. I think that harsh penalties are called for. And because you're demanding that the police face harsh punishment for their crimes, just so you know, this time it's going to be MAGA people, but next time it's going to be Black Lives Matters. Well, this shows what an idiot she is. It's been Black Lives Matters up until now. It's been people who have been protesting police violence up until now. It's about damn time that the MAGA people finally got held to account. But the Washington Post piece goes on to basically say there are a few more police departments where they found a lot of these thugs with badges who took part in the insurrection. And, well, they're looking into it, but don't expect anything. Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo said, if you're openly liking and supporting comments conveying support for people who had nooses or were screaming about finding the Vice President of the United States and harming him, you'll likely receive severe sanctions. Really? That's all? If you decide that you're going to like or support comments that are calling for people to be killed, calling for the vice president to be killed, you're supporting comments calling for the overthrow of the government, what's going to happen to you? Severe sanctions. They are going all out to make sure that the enforcement arm of white supremacy is thoroughly protected, and that's because white supremacy is stuck on the horns of a dilemma. You see, they don't have the ability to punish these traitors and maintain white supremacy, because white supremacy is going to need these clowns to augment their numbers. They're going to need all hands on deck in order to make sure that the threat of black empowerment is contained. And that's the main thing they're thinking about 24/7. What they're hoping for is that they can make nice with the terrorists, and they can mend fences with these seditionists. And hey, guys, we've been down this road before, haven't we? But us white supremacists got to stick together. This is the long game that white supremacy is playing. Oh, we don't want to be too hasty with the punishments now. Just keep in mind, we'll be undermining ourselves when it comes time to put those niggers in check. This is history repeating itself. After the Civil War, Robert Lee was allowed to go back to Virginia, and from what I understand, apparently he became a professor at Princeton or something. He became an Ivy League professor teaching insurrection to the next generation. Jefferson Davis, the first and last president of the Confederacy, he did a brief prison term, like a couple of years. And then what happened was President Johnson, Andrew Johnson, decided to give a general pardon to all of those traitors, including Jefferson Davis. And in 1978, President Jimmy Carter from Georgia, he decided to make it all official. He restored full citizenship rights to Jefferson Davis, albeit posthumously. Now, part of me says there's some delicious irony in that. Sure. He can have his citizenship back after he's dead. And it does after he's no longer in a position to enjoy it. That's part of me looks and says that's fine. But the thing about it is the guy was a traitor. Shouldn't have happened at all. He shouldn't have gotten a pardon of any sort. But the thing is, this guy led the largest insurrection that the country had ever seen. And now there's been a second one. And the country, not even 5 years, less than 5 years after this act of mass treason, was already handing out pardons to them. After all the bloodshed that the Confederacy was responsible for, after all of the strife, after all of the national pain that this Confederacy was responsible for, the government was tripping over its own feet in order to make sure, we got to get past that. We got to bury that as quickly as possible. Yeah, after all, as Thomas Jefferson wrote, we have a tiger, that is the black nation, black people in this country. We have a tiger by the ears, and we can neither safely hold him nor let him go. So it's going to be all hands on deck to try to contain the black threat as long as possible. That's the horns of the dilemma that the white government's caught on. That's the reason why they're looking at this situation. It's a matter of, man, we don't have the ability to punish all these guys and maintain the kind of unity we're going to be needing to go after these niggers and make sure black people are held in check. We don't have the ability to do that. So they're trying to thread the needle. They're trying to see if they can walk a fine line. It's not going to work, but they're going to try. And the exact same thugs, particularly the police, who helped to orchestrate and carried out and participated in this treason, they're going to be emboldened by this because it will just reinforce, hey, nothing's going to be done against us. That's right. You need us more than we need you. And the police will understand that they can get rid of the government anytime they want to, or at the very least, there will be no consequences for trying. Everybody who's in Congress ought to be demanding that there's going to be an investigation. Their lives are at stake, but that's the thing. They're willing to die for white supremacy. Clearly, the members of Congress are willing to die for it because they're not doing anything to protect themselves from it. They are just dialing themselves in for this to happen again. And the idea of the police departments, we're going to be launching probes to find out how many of our boys in blue took part in this treason. Yeah, and I'm sure like with every murder and rape and assault that the police have committed, when they investigate themselves, I'm sure that they're going to find that there was no wrongdoing. So that being the case, what this is about is okay, we got caught. Hopefully, if we just pretend as if, oh, we're looking into it, the white media will say, well, they're looking into it, and they'll warn the niggers, you better drop this line of inquiry because we'll be looking at you next. And hopefully that'll be enough to bury it. It won't, but, they had to try. But notice how none of the right wing nuts who are now pathetically pretending to be victims of whatever will unequivocally say that their fellow right wing racists who stormed the Capitol were wrong. Notice how you're not hearing that? None of the right wing nuts on any level are saying that these terrorists must be punished harshly so that this doesn't happen again. What it tells you is they are all in accord that this is what they want. They are determined to get this. This is history repeating itself. The Confederacy had its mass act of treason minimized before the guns had even fallen silent. There was already this massive drive to, well, it wasn't as bad as all that, and there was kind of a misunderstanding, and it was all the niggers' fault anyway. Those black people, they were the ones responsible for all of this. And now here they are doing it again. Oh, well, people just got caught up in the moment, caught up in the moment. Now, black folks try that, and it's a matter of, well, you're going to be caught up for 50 to life while you're at it, and you'll have a long time to think about it. But nobody is saying, especially on the right, not enough people on the left are saying it, but nobody on the right saying, hey, what happened on Wednesday was treason, and everyone who took part in it must be punished harshly because you don't want the government to be destabilized. Instead, they're looking and going, nah, we got to bring this government down because we're running out of time to be able to make our big push for that white ethno-state. The window of opportunity is closing and we better do this now. Yeah, we failed once, but hey, there's plenty of time between now and 2040. The same hypocrites and liars who are always waxing poetic about the founding fathers and how great the United States is, these same liars, none of them are saying that the attempted coup carried out by their ideological brethren was wrong. None of them are saying that this should not have happened and cannot be allowed to happen again. None of them are saying that. Nobody's saying, hey, after 9/11, we had the Patriot Act and we had a whole bunch of laws put on the books that make it where you can start having a more direct hand in stopping this kind of anti-American activity. None of them are saying that. Nobody's saying, hey, we already got the tools, RICO and the Patriot Act. We already got the tools to go after them. Instead, you got the Washington Post saying, this is governmental overreach. And you black people better stop agitating for this. You're going to make the police look very bad with this. That's what reading between the lines, that's what the Washington Post is saying. You're going to make the police look really bad, so you better stop this. Because this is going to be turned on you. You think we're going to be actually breaking the enforcement arm of white supremacy? No, we're going to turn this on you. Yeah, everyone's doing the same old whataboutism. Clearly, they're not against the coup. They're just against being punished for it. And by the way, now they're saying that they're going to be really mad now. That's what we're hearing from a lot of them. Oh, we're going to be really angry now. You shouldn't have stopped us. We're going to get really mad now. Well, there's an easy solution for that. All you have to do is put on reruns of Duck Dynasty and hand out free samples of OxyContin, and the inbreds will calm down. Copious amounts of self-aggrandizement and barbiturates, that usually will help. That usually does the trick to soothe the savage beasts. But what happened on Wednesday was a massive crime. One that the white authorities, not only do they not want it to be solved, they don't even want it to be so much as investigated. Because the very people who are standing around pretending, oh, we can't imagine what happened, they were the ones who perpetrated this treason. As I told you, the so-called authorities, they're making a few arrests. There were thousands of people involved in this treason, by the way. You're going to tell me that some of the more high-profile idiots that there were some pictures of, okay, there's been some arrests, but what about punishment? Because the charges are nothing. Oh, you entered a restricted area. Misuse of government property. In other words, the federal equivalents of trespassing and shoplifting. That's what's going on here. Nobody's being hit with terrorism charges. If you got people standing on the floor of the U.S. Senate carrying automatic pistols and plastic ties of the sort that are used by the police as plastic cuffs, the kind that you use to bind people. They're standing on the floor of the Senate with guns. And they brought equipment with them that are meant to tie people up. What the hell do you think was on their minds? No one's being charged with sedition. You had a U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel, retired, who took part in this treason, and nobody's looking and saying, well, when does this guy go to the gallows? Instead, the Washington Post is talking about, this raises concerns about free speech. Treason isn't free speech. Well, it is if you're white. If you're white, it's free speech. TBA, by the way, did a masterful breakdown of this in his broadcast last night. You ought to check it out. But white supremacy is very concerned right now. They've got to preserve their numbers now more than ever. Yes, those white politicians know that their fellow right-wing nuts tried to overthrow them, and some of those angry insurrectionists came there specifically to kill them, and they killed at least one Capitol Hill policeman. But these white government officials, they also know that the white immunity is the totality of the law. The law cannot be allowed to touch them, not even for treason. Because that is how the culture of the dominant society has developed. I dare not call it evolved. There's nothing evolved about it, so we will simply say developed. Over the centuries, they understand that this is part of the glue that binds the dominant society together. White privilege, the system of goodies, guarantees, and giveaways that are given to those who the system classifies as white. And part of that is you get immunity from law, even for things like treason. It's part of the perks that are expected. Hey, if you're classified as white, this is part of the perks. I'm not supposed to get punished for anything. It's all just one big game. By the way, on a side note, one of the terrorists, that white woman who got herself shot at the Capitol, apparently some people are saying that she was shot, but that the Capitol Hill policeman who shot her was black. And that being the case, how much you want to bet that they're going to be eventually saying that this guy needs to be relieved. He needs to be relieved of duty. There needs to be an investigation of him. Oh, sure. He could say, I was scared for my life, and there's going to be like, no, this was definitely against department procedures. I do believe that the Capitol Hill policeman who defended himself from those white terrorists, I do believe that he was indeed black. And the woman that he killed was clearly white, and that being the case, they're going to be putting up that narrative that, this guy, that was an overreaction, wasn't it? What about training? Well, our training doesn't exactly give us wherewithal to be shooting people. Even just because they're trying to overthrow the government, they're here to kill people, and they just got through beating one of your coworkers to death with a fire extinguisher. That's no reason to shoot anyone. Sure, they're entering the Capitol building with automatic pistols and plastic ties. Clearly, these guys are thinking about taking hostages, if not executing people summarily. But that doesn't give you the right to actually shoot anyone. And so you're going to see a ton of I'm white and I say so going on here as more and more people are going to get arrested, but the public's going to start realizing, wait a minute here, nobody's getting hit with anything serious. You're just giving some rinky-dink know-nothing charge. It's only been a few days since the attempted coup. It hasn't even been a week yet. We still got a few days before it's been a full week. And already there's this massive push by the media to try to minimize this insurrection and try to make it out to be not as bad as all that, and threatening the public, especially black people, threatening black people that you better stop pushing for the police to be identified and investigated. Yeah, white power is scared right now. They need the enforcement arm of white supremacy. And so we see not news coverage of the insurrection, but a news cover-up. This is not an attempt to punish these terrorists. This is an organized, systematic attempt to release the terrorists. No one is accusing them of attacking police, even though they're all on video doing it. You don't see the Fraternal Order of Thugs issuing any half-baked demands that these terrorists be charged. No one in right-wing hate radio or left-wing TV, for that matter, is pointing out that all the people who stormed the Capitol are guilty of assaulting a police officer. Every single person who entered that Capitol building is guilty of assaulting a police officer. Every single one of them. And with the murder of Capitol Hill policeman Brian Sticknick, everyone who entered that Capitol building is guilty of murder. The all-in laws apply to all of them. Oh, so Brian Sticknick was killed by some one or two fools over here. That's okay. All of you guys who rushed in there with him, all you guys who were there, the all-in laws apply to every single one of you. That's the law, by the way. Anyone who was there, you can get charged just because of the fact that you were there. Well, if you were black, that's how it would go. So the white media is already hard at work trying to plant a false narrative. And the narrative's going to be, the police were not the ones responsible for this. Why, okay, maybe there were some policemen who were there, but they didn't take part in this. They were standing on the grass somewhere. They were over by the ice cream stand. They were over by the World War II memorial, but they certainly were not rushing into the Capitol building, beating the police there and looking for congressmen that they could kill. The police certainly didn't do that. Nothing like that. That's the false narrative that the white media is attempting to plant right now, and it's meant to deceive people. So that later on, as the evidence mounts up and shows, yeah, the police were indeed in there. They were complicit in this. They were the ones who helped organize this. And a number of cops were actually the ones who rushed into the Capitol building, taking full part in this treason. The white media will try to bury that somewhere and say, well, you know, the facts haven't all come. We have to wait for the facts to come out. Let's wait till all the facts come out. You'll be hearing that quite a bit. Because they're trying to cover up what is the clear reality here. The Capitol Hill police did not fail to protect the Capitol building. The breach was in fact allowed to happen by the Capitol Hill police. The only politician I've seen who called out this fact was Representative Norma Torres. She's the only one actually saying that the Capitol Hill, who directly coming up the middle and saying the Capitol Hill police took part in this. It could not have happened without them. Now, that might be something that a lot of people don't want to have to say, but she's admitting to the reality. Jim Clyburn tap danced around the issue. He didn't want to have to say the Capitol Hill police clearly were involved in this. Though he was very concerned about his iPad, and he was also very concerned about how they find my inner office. Hope they didn't take none of my bourbon out my desk. Or any of my Zatarain's or my secret 11 herbs and spices that I use for my annual fish fry. That was his main concern. And by the way, as for Representative Torres, I have not yet seen her on MSNBC or CNN talking about this. I don't know. I guess they're not terribly interested in talking to a member of Congress who's saying, hey, I was there when the attempted overthrow of the government took place, and I think the Capitol Hill police were in on it. Oh yeah, Ari Melber mentioned it, but the question is, are they going to follow up on it? This should be a non-stop story. This should be a story that they're following up, hounding the police, making it very clear. Treason just happened here, and how many of them were cops? But of course, we know it won't be allowed to get that far. They've done a one and done, cover their butts mention of it. And as far as they're concerned, unless pressure is put on them, they're going to try to move on to something else, preferably something that doesn't mention the police. You know, after a mass shooting, I think it was the Mother Emanuel Church, though it could have been another mass shooting, Lawrence O'Donnell asked the question if the shooter was someone who the NRA considered material for the well-regulated militia. That's what he was talking. Lawrence O'Donnell was giving a commentary about some mass shooting, and he was asking that question. I forget who the shooter was in specific. I think it was Dylan Roof. But Lawrence O'Donnell's rhetorical question was, is this guy what the NRA considers material for the well-regulated militia? Well, I can answer Lawrence's question for him. The answer is yes. The NRA, as well as the government, they want white supremacists who are willing to mow down a bunch of people without a moment's hesitation. That's precisely what they think of as a well-regulated militia. A Capitol Hill policeman was murdered, but you haven't heard any of the Blue Lives crowd going on a tear about it. This was the single most blatant example of a mob brutalizing the police en masse, chasing police around the Capitol building, bludgeoning and even killing the police. Black Lives Matters never did that. Black Lives Matters never bludgeoned a police officer with a fire extinguisher. They never killed a police officer. They never dragged police officers to be beaten or anything like that. Black Lives Matters never did that. But the racist liars who have been lecturing everyone about respect the badge, Blue Lives Matters, well, we all know what Blue Lives Matters means. It was nothing more than a feeble attempt to try to have a retort to Black Lives Matters as a way of saying we deny the Black Lives Matters. Blue Lives Matter. The white supremacists with badges matter. And the people who were waving those thin blue line flags, they were the ones who killed Brian Sicknick. He died under a Blue Lives Matters flag. He died under one of those thin blue line flags. He was murdered by the very people who had been telling everyone that they respected the police and the police keep us safe and we've got to stick up for the cops and blue. Those are the people who killed him because they never meant a word of it. They were simply trying to cover for white supremacists who were killing black people, and that was just their pathetic little slogan. Someone should tell Negro Jim Clyburn that's the kind of sloganeering that kills people. BLM never beat a cop to death. They never shot a single cop. They never bludgeoned a cop or even gave a cop so much as a paper cut. So where's Sean Hannity at? To pretend that he sympathizes with the police. Nobody's actually doing that. No phony displays of what about the cops? Hey, what about the war on cops? We just saw a real war, not a fictional pretend one like the kind that Heather McDonald was making up in her make-believe asinine brain. We just saw a real war on cops take place in front of the nation in real time. So where's Heather McDonald at? With her new fiction book, The War on Cops, where's she at? Where's Sean Hannity at to talk about the war on cops? Where's Rush Limbaugh at? Where's Tucker Carlson at? Where's President Trump at? Where's Laura Ingraham at? Where's Fox News and the rest of the false news brigade? Where the hell are they at to tell us about how Blue Lives Matters? Instead, they're not talking about that at all because it will require them to indict their little white insurrection. Where's the Fraternal Order of Police at? Well, the most that the Fraternal Order of Police could do was to issue one clearly insincere blink-and-you'll-miss-it mention of the murder of Brian Sicknick, and after that they haven't mentioned him since. In fact, I'm not even sure if they mentioned him by name. They just mentioned him obliquely. But that's the best the Fraternal Order of Police could do. As far as they're concerned, police lives only matter if they can make political hay out of it. Brian Sicknick died as the result of the actions of other police officers who took part in treason, a treasonous coup d'etat attempt. So the Fraternal Order of Police is like, well, we don't want to be putting too much heat on ourselves because if we demand that an investigation into the murder of Brian Sicknick, hell, we might find that it was a cop who killed him. That's what the Fraternal Order of Police is concerned about. Well, we don't want to ask too many questions about that because we start asking about the people who were the other terrorists who died. Hell, for all we know, it was terrorist on terrorist violence. We start asking about the cops who got assaulted at the Capitol building. Hell, we'll find that it was cops who did it to them. So instead, we'll just give a completely insincere, clearly they don't mean a word of it. We'll just go ahead and give some phony sympathy and then move on and say, well, you know, being a cop is dangerous work, but we love our communities and don't ask about who killed Brian Sicknick and don't ask if there were any cops who were at the Capitol building who charged in there. Don't ask about that. Let's just move on. Let's just move on. Bygones be bygones. No, there's not going to be any pompous white police chiefs going on TV saying, well, I say Blue Lives Matter. Yeah, none of that. You won't see any of them lamenting the fact that it's Fox News who is celebrating the people who murdered Brian Sicknick. Fox News is celebrating them and protecting them and taking up for them and making excuses for them. I don't hear any outrage about that. You don't have any police deciding to make asinine videos to post them on YouTube and saying, we put our lives on the line every day, and Fox News is making excuses for the murder of one of our brothers. They're not doing anything like that. No police deciding to do any attention-whoring grandstanding videos where they try to say, we put our lives on the line for our communities. We do a tough job every day. And to see one of our brothers bludgeoned to death and the animals who did it being praised as patriots and excuses made for them, Fox News should be taken off the air. Go after their smile. The police aren't saying anything like that. So what does that tell you? Blue lives don't matter a damn to the police unless they think that there's some political profit that they can get from it, preferably at black people's expense. If they think that they can make political hay out of it in a way that disadvantages black people, then all of a sudden, oh yeah, blue lives. But hey, what about the guys who beat the hell out of an entire police department? Because that's what happened with that insurrection. They beat the hell out of the Capitol Hill police. An entire police department was beaten up and on live TV. But you don't see any outrage from the Fraternal Order of Police. But then again, why would they? You have a hell of a lot of the members of the Fraternal Order of Police who took part in this mass carnage. Of course, as we all know, everyone who was talking that blue lives crap, like Barack Obama, they were all liars. They understood the police were carrying out violent murders of black people, and they wanted to give their full support and encouragement to this lawlessness, which they did. You know, Tariq had often pointed out that it's people from the dominant society as white folks who hate the police. White people dislike the police more than black people do. They're the main ones who you see cursing at the cops and saying they'll do this and do that. White people are the ones who harbor the most hostility towards the police. The only reason you saw them pretending to do that blue lives stuff was because of the fact that they need the police to protect them for their own illegality. It's a matter of, well, we can agree that the police need to have a free hand to deal with the Negras. There have been hundreds of Black Lives Matter marches around the country and around the world, and not one of them resulted in the people, the protesters, stampeding the police. None of them resulted in a single cop getting killed. But Fox News doesn't mention that, and Agent Orange, President Trump, he's not mentioning that either. Yeah, they would like for the murder of Brian Sicknick to fall down the memory hole. And all talk of the police's involvement. How many cops were involved in this insurrection? Well, how many Capitol Hill police officers? If you look at their social media, start checking out who these guys talk to, we'll find that a lot of Capitol Hill police are allied with or even members of these white supremacist groups. That this was coordinated. The terrorists did not breach the barriers. There's video of the cops opening up the doggone gates, opening up the barriers, moving the barriers out of the way and say, okay, you can go ahead and get them. The Congress was handed over to these terrorists by the Capitol Hill police. And all of this at the behest of Agent Orange. The only outrage that you're hearing from the associates and well-wishers of the seditionists is that Donald Trump got banned from Twitter. Well, Donald Trump's not dead. Officer Sicknick is. But all these clowns can think about is the political consequences they might suffer. Well, family, the only issue that is of importance in regards to this failed coup d'etat is whether or not people are going to get punished harshly and finding out how many of the police were involved in this terrorist attack. How many of the police took part in this treason? Making sure you get names, making sure you point them out. Making sure that the police are not allowed to walk away from this. We're going to handcuff the police to this treason because they committed it. We're going to handcuff them to it. And no empty, pathetic threats from Jeff Bezos' little rag, his little newsletter, is going to dissuade us from that. You can make all the empty threats you want about, you call yourselves trying to give the public a taste for punishing the police, and it's only going to come back on you. You're the ones we're going to investigate. You're already doing it, and you don't see us being intimidated, do you? If that's your only threat, you ain't got a threat. If that's your only deterrent, then that means you don't have one. But clearly the white media is terrified of this particular line of inquiry being followed to its natural logical conclusion. They don't want anyone asking this question. They're scared of people pursuing this line. They should be. In 2020, the police murdered George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And in 2021, the police tried to murder the United States federal government.